Hello everybody, welcome back. Now, we all know when it comes to mini painting, there's a few colours that are an absolute pain in the ass to paint. Usually bright colours, so you're talking your bright yellow, your white in particular, because the pigment in those bright colours is so thick, it makes it a nightmare to try and paint them on. While the other end of the spectrum, black. Black can be a pain in the ass to paint because just highlighting it and getting it to look good without turning it into a different colour can be very, very tricky. Now in this video, I've started painting Eldrad. This is the charity miniature that I'm doing for the Apothecarian and his cat's charity raffle. And I've just done the inner cloak, as you can see there. He's not all black. The inner cloak I've done as a base coat of Xandri Dust. I'll go over all the paints and stuff in a minute. And now we're going to go on to painting the black. Now, I'm going to show you how I do it. This isn't the way to do it. This is just a way to do it. This is just how I like to do it. This is quite a common combination of colours. But yeah, I'll go to top down in a second and I will show you what to do. Okay, so you might think, because he's already been base coated, or rather primed, so he's been primed with Colour Forge matte black. Now the first thing we need to do, paint it black again. So you can't really paint, well, you could paint over the black primer, or just use that as the colour and start highlighting from there. But it gets tricky if you make mistakes. It's hard to get the same colour again. I know the Artis Opus, the Vallejo, what is it, Black 105, I believe. That's a very matte black, and it's very, very similar. But I'm going to go over this now with a Baden Black from GW, and then that'll actually give us our base coat, not the primer coat, the base coat. So let's do that first. Use a slightly bigger brush. So this is the Abaddon Black. I'm just going to do a small section for you now. So when you're painting cloaks and things, well, when you're painting anything really, you want to do your brush strokes in the same direction. He says as he crosses it there. That way you're not tearing the paint, you're not creating unnecessary texture. Keeps it nice and smooth. These have all been thinned down ever so slightly with a bit of water. Like so. And my Artis Opus brushes are a little bit old. Bristles tend to splay a little bit. So I'm using one now just for doing the base coat because it's a bit of a workhorse brush now. Now the reason I've done the Xandri Dust first is because I have to get in to some very tricky places to get to. So rather than paint the black and then get it covered in Xandri Dust to then have to try and touch up the black again and then go around in circles as I make a mess trying to touch up everything else. If you do the Xandri Dust first, I'm talking like areas in here, then you don't really need to get all the way around with black, but you do need to get quite far around with the inner cloak colours. Yeah, that's the bottom of that done. Now the trick with painting cloth is to basically go against your instincts. So if you started painting armor, you will have gotten used to edge highlighting everything, especially if you're doing the heavy metal style. Cloth behaves a bit differently. I don't know if you can see that. You can see the bright spots aren't just on the tips of all these folds. So you have a light bit going into that crease, over that round, down into that crease in there. And that's essentially what we're going to be trying to emulate when we paint this. If you're ever unsure about where the light's likely to hit, just hold it up to your hobby light. Try and get the light where you'd expect the light direction to be coming from, and you'll soon see the soft sheen coming off the paint. Or if you're clever with a computer, take a photo of it and put it in Photoshop. So while that's drying, our first colour, Inky Darkness, which is this one here. What we're going to do, so it's been thinned down a little bit, just so that a touch more. Got my orange brush size 1 for this, and my fancy specs on that you can't see. So if we take this leg here, so we're going to go with bright spot. It's going to be essentially down here. Something a bit like that. Now if we go to the next folds, it's going to go all the way down on this face here, all the way down to there. Then around the top of the crease. You can see that there. And then the next colour can be Thunderhawk Blue. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to mix the Thunderhawk Blue with the Inky Darkness, because I tend to do a lot of layering when I paint. Colour somewhere in between. It's up to you how much you want to mix. And then we want to go a little smaller on this one, working up to that high point on the crease. And then again with Thunderhawk. Keeping the paint nice and thin for these. If you're doing armor panels and a lot of edge highlighting, you probably want the paint a little bit thicker than this. And then the next one is Fenrisian Grey. So again, we're going to do a mix between the two. The last one, this is going to be relatively sharp, pure Fenrisian. So, got some gentle blends on there, only keeping the shadows. Now, what I'm going to do from that, apart from adding just some sort of mid-tony highlights just along the bottom edge, these just help tie it all together a bit. Now that we've done all that, you might be thinking, that looks a bit bright. Doesn't really look black anymore. I mean, you're getting a lot of light reflected off the camera, I'll give you that. But then, if we go back to the black, we're going to make a little bit of a glaze from the black. And your glaze consistency is basically coloured water. So if you think, kind of like that, wick off the excess on your thumb or wherever, and then you want to glaze that down into the shadow. Remember, this isn't a wash. So you want the majority of the paint to pool where you want the darkest bit to be. So you drag it all the way down into the shadow. In this case, you're going uphill. and it'll probably take a couple of coats to do. What that does is just knocks back the highlights a bit, but it also blends them together better. So for when you're wanting to try and get some smooth blends, I always find it's best to do your layers. You can wet blend if you want to give that a try. I've never been amazingly successful at it, but then I haven't tried it that much. So that's why I kind of prefer doing it the layering way, because you can place your highlights and things better where you want them. But then once you've done all the layering and you got your final highlights in, either mix up a glaze of your shadow colour and go over the whole thing down into your shadow. You can do it incrementally again like we did with the layering, where you do the whole thing down into the shadow, and then every subsequent layer gets slightly smaller and you're leaving more of the paint exposed. But it depends on how much you want to tint and how far you want to tint it. But that is how I do my black cloth. And it does depend on what kind of effect that you're going for as well. I'd always think with someone like Eldrad and like the whole elves range, their cloths and stuff, they're going to be more silky, so they're going to have more of sheen to them. So the more sheen they have, the more you're going to get the bright lines and the high spots and the brighter colours where the light hits the fabric. If it's more of a matte colour or it's a slightly rougher textured fabric, you wouldn't necessarily get it like this. It would probably be a bit darker. So it just depends on what kind of effect you're going for, really. But yeah, that's how I do my blacks. And a similar thing with with armour panels as well. I'll use a similar colour selection, or the same colour selection in fact, for the majority of them, which gives a bit of a cooler looking black. And you start out with the Inky Darkness for your chunky highlight, and you gradually work up to Fenrisian for your fine highlight, and then you could go as far as doing some blue horror spot highlights, particularly if you're doing it Eddie Metal style, because I think that is their recipe, or one of their recipes anyway. But you could use the same colours for doing more volumetric highlights as well, or if you want a slightly warmer highlight to your black, you could use greys, or even like bone coloured bone tones, something like that, mixed in with the black to generate highlights for a warmer tone to the model. But I think with this, the cooler tones of the blues, they contrast well with the warmer tone that's going to be going on the other side of his cloak and all like the other wraith bony bits that are around the model. So this will get a bit more work yet. There'll be a bit more glazing to do. Just knock it back, a little bit more blending. But you can take it as far as you like. You don't have to do everything that I've just done, and it's entirely up to you how far you take the highlights out. You don't have to do them as big as I've done. Personal preference at the end of the day, like all our painting. And there we have it. That's how I go about doing my black cloth. when you take it away from the hobby lamp, it does look a bit smoother. The glaring light of the hobby lamp usually leaves a bit of a sheen over everything. But if you take it away and just have it under a normal house light, it looks a lot smoother. It looks a lot more natural. Getting those highlights as well. Again, like I said, I'll be knocking it back a little bit more yet. And this is just using standard colours from Games Workshop. Other ranges might have slightly darker versions of these colours, which you wouldn't have to try and glaze over as much, or you could just add a bit more black in from the start and just work up from that if you didn't want to do all the glazing. But like I say, this is how I do it, and again, it's how I do my armour as well. I like to go for a bit more of a, it's kind of like a combination volumetric and heavy metal style for my painting. So I do more highlighting on like the flat surfaces or the rounded surfaces on, say, a Space Marine armour, for example. So trying to use the glazes at the end, it just helps smooth everything over. I quite like the sketchy style of it anyway, but you do kind of want them to blend together. You don't want real harsh lines in your highlights, particularly on tiny models, because it can stick out like a sore thumb. So I'll get the rest of the black done on that in a similar fashion. We've got all the folds on the big cloak on the back yet. It's going to be fun. But you got more scope for blending the highlights on that kind of surface. And then it'll be on to probably bone. Get all the wraith bone and the inside of his cloak done. All going to be similar colours. So yeah, that'll be the next one when I get around to doing that. But for now, I shall leave you to it, and I shall track on painting. So thank you very much for watching. If you got this far, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, maybe drop a comment. Is this how you paint your blacks? Do you have a different recipe that you like to use? Do you have any suggestions for changing up the way I did it? Do you have any questions further to what I've already done? Do you know the meaning of life? 42, if you don't know. Yeah. So again, thank you very much, and I will catch you all in the next video. Ta-ra!